Show, New Since Part 2, Stories We Tell. Welcome to the New to You Show.
Yeah. I'm your new to you host.
Oh, you're one of the hosts.
You're one of the hosts, Jules. What are you
I'm
trying to steal
I'm a
this?
newish host.
Come on, man. Come on. You are new. It's true.
Yeah, I'm not brand new, but you know.
Newish.
You still smell. You got that new host smell.
I have it all the time.
The theme that we've been going with since last show and this one and the next one after is things that are new since we went on hiatus. So sort of getting us back into the groove and getting you into the groove by saying what's been new in this year or so since
what have we discovered
we've been
in
not
our absence?
Presenting the stuffs to you.
Yeah.
So this week, again, you've got me, John Holt, and with me, one of my co-hosts,
Keith Vincent, but you don't got me. I'm just here.
Oh, you have.
No.
And I'm Jules. That's it.
This week, somebody's got something that's new to them, and I think it's Keith.
Oh, yeah. So what's new to me this week? I started swimming laps at the gym.
Oh, wow.
I always like to swim, and I'm lucky enough to belong to the YMCA that has a pretty swell pool in it. I've been going to swim class with the youngin', and every time we're there, I'm like, man, I should just start swimming laps. So this morning, I got up stupid early and swam laps before I came into work.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah.
How big's the pool?
It's like, regular Olympic swimming pool size.
Wow, nice.
Does swimming make you like crazy hungry?
Yeah, I don't know why. It really.
Same here.
I think it's got to do with the like stuff moving around in your guts because of the air in there.
I like that theory.
Yeah.
Because if I'm even like in a pool for 5 minutes, I'm starving. I'm like, oh, I gotta eat.
And it's fierce too when you get out.
Yeah.
It's like
I think it's because you
hunger.
become a shark.
And if you don't stop swimming,
You'll devour yourself.
Devour yourself from the inside out, right? That's
Yeah.
what happens to sharks we learned last week.
Right. It's the dark shark truth.
I think we've jumped the shark.
But anyway, that's what's new to me. It's fun. I swam about, for 20 minutes, which doesn't sound like long, but man, that's a lot of swimming.
Do you have to do the whole shower before thing? Is that
Well, you do
encouraged
their
at the
little
Y?
rinse out thing. Yeah, the rinse out.
And then do you shower after?
Mm-hmm. Well, in this case, I'm coming to work, so I shower. And
Do you do the full, get naked in the shower with a bunch of guys?
At the gym, at my gym, they have little
the
curtains
Y.
at the curtains. So,
Nice.
so yeah, that's what's new to me. I'm a big supporter of the YMCA. I've been in fact, John, you were with me when I first signed up in Park Slope.
Park Slope.
That's why. And now I'm.
Takes us back.
And they're building.
I belong to the one in
I think they've
Chinatown.
built a new pool there. They had a very small pool, and they just finished a big one.
Well,
in
good
Park
for
Slope.
So
them.
maybe we'll all be swimming next time.
Yeah, maybe it'll be new to all of us.
What stroke do you do?
Freestyle.
Freestyle.
I did two full laps of the backstroke, and my problem is that I can't. If you're swimming in a competition when you do the backstroke, there's usually a stripe on the ceiling, so you can keep aligned. But this doesn't have it, so I kept kind of hitting the rope thing. So, but I love doing the backstroke though. It's good to
How
mix it
many
up.
laps do you do?
I don't know. I think today I probably ended up doing around 16 laps today, though.
That's a lot for
which
first
is
time.
There and back one lap. So yeah.
Sort of a newer, fitter you.
Well, hopefully by the time this airs, maybe we'll see it.
Or you'll have drowned.
Yeah, one or the other. That's what's new to me. But I understand that Julian has brought something really an interesting. I'm acting like it's a surprise. I already know what it is. I watched
We did mention it last week.
That's right. So Jules has got a great documentary to talk about today that he's wanting to introduce to you.
Can you describe the whole story in your own words?
What? The entire story? I guess I better pee first.
I'm interested in the way we tell stories about our lives, about the fact that the truth about the past is often ephemeral and difficult to pin down.
Well, I guess if you could start by describing
What I discovered, what's been new to me since I last was on this podcast before the hiatus, was this documentary by
The one new thing that he discovered.
the one new thing that stood out and that I decided to share with people. In part, I thought maybe because it's documentary film and it wasn't like a huge one. It didn't win Oscar nominations or anything. That maybe it wasn't on people's radars, and I didn't really expect that much from it when I watched it. I think it was just like on Netflix, that kind of thing, and it ended up really surprising surprising me, and ended up thinking about it a lot after I saw it, and ended up watching it a second time, and that's always a good sign, I think. Stories We Tell is the name of the documentary. It's directed by Sarah Polley, who's also an actress who's pretty well known. She's been in some...
the biggest film was probably the zombie one. Her biggest, Day of the Dead.
Yeah, the Day of the Dead.
The remake.
Dawn
of the Dead?
Was it the Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah, I think it was a
Dawn of the
remake
Dead.
of Dawn of the Dead.
The mall.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a Canadian documentary. She's Canadian. That's not that important, but it's a pretty personal film. It's about her and her family, and it's about her mother most of all, but it involves her entire family. And it's sort of like her mother had passed when she was young by being absent, kind of an important thing in her family, and people talked about her a lot and told stories about her. So she kind of approaches the story of her mother, and there's also sort of a mystery around who her father is. There's doubt that the father who raised her is actually her biological father.
Mike.
Mike. And it was always sort of joked about in the family, but never really discussed directly. And she ends up kind of investigating that, kind of unraveling this story. But in addition to being this personal story about her and her family, it's also another element that I really enjoy about the documentary is it's also kind of meta about storytelling itself. Each member of the family has their own take on it. Everyone's sort of a little bit of unreliable narrator, and there's a lot of misremembering or thinking you know the truth but you don't really. It's sort of like she's trying to kind of unravel this mystery,
kind of navigate the stories.
When it comes down to it, she's the one who's going to be editing this stuff and putting narration to it and deciding what is shown in what order and what gets what relevance. So she's the one who's also going to be telling this story in her way. At the end of the day, this final lens of the craft is going to be through her perspective as well, which by looking at all these other people and talking about how they're not particularly reliable and their perspective is their own and unique, that her perspective is also going to be potentially skewed.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that almost everyone in her family is involved in the film business in one way or another. Like her parents were
just acting.
Yeah, her parents were actors. She was an actress.
They were
also
primarily
filmmaker.
Stage actors.
And her mom was a casting agent.
Yeah, her mom was a casting agent. They're all also very aware of all these things, of storytelling, of editing. They're self-aware of what they're doing as well. And at the same time, her father was always interested in writing. And I think through the process of making this film, he sort of rekindled his connection to writing, something that her mother was always encouraging him to do, but he sort of never fulfilled. And so he also wrote the story from his perspective of her mother and kind of the mystery. The mystery. The backbone of the film is him reading this story, and you see him recording it, you see her directing him, etc. So there's a lot of layers to it. I think in and of itself, it's an interesting story, but it's also told in an interesting way. I found everyone in her family kind of very likable, congenial, and they all were very well-spoken and kind of funny and quirky and
charming.
Yeah, and there's also like she finds out who her real father is, and that's a big turning point. I don't know, it's weird for some reason. I don't really want to give it away, even though I'm assuming a lot of people going into this know. But I don't know, for some reason I kind of want to leave it. But maybe you guys want to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll let it happen naturally.
I think that we can talk about this, and I think that it's a little bit of a spoiler, but I don't know. I mean, I think we can talk about it without talking about giving that part away, because that's her quest, but I don't think that's the piece.
No, it's true.
I think that's an
important moment.
There's something important within that we might touch on, but I don't think we get too detailed.
And it definitely like helps kind of push the film. Like I think without that moment, the film would be missing something, and it kind of really definitely like made it happen.
Yeah.
From having listened to some interviews with her and stuff, like all of the film wasn't clear, and it sort of made itself as she went along, and it wasn't just like she filmed everything and then figured out what it was. There was a lot of back and forth, and again, because everyone was very like engaged in the story and part of the story as well. It was interesting. So she finds out who her biological father is, but she also gets a lot closer to the father who raised her in the process. And there's also an element that like the biological father is also, he's a film producer and also has interest in writing, and he wants to write the story. So there's sort of like competing, like everyone wants to tell this story and wants to make it their own. But in the end, because she's making the film, she sort of gets to take that over. In another interview with the director, Sarah Polley, it was interesting because they asked her like, well, you could have also made this an article, right? Or wrote it, written it or something like that. Why did you decide to make a film? And she was kind of like, well, I'm learning how to make films. I know how to make films. I don't really know how to write. So they was kind of like, it's just kind of her medium, and that's why she decided to do that. Yeah, that's it. So what did you guys think?
Well, just like last week, I liked it, but at the same time, I had this weird irrational response where I was just like, I guess I don't like documentaries that are about the people making the documentaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I just learned because my girlfriend Zoe is going to school for documentary. I learned that's like self-reflective. Is the genre.
And I don't know why. I don't know why I have that response because an autobiography of a book autobiography, I'm all about. I love that. I don't know why as a documentary. I just feel this weird view of documentaries where it's almost like journalistic, and you can't possibly be journalistic without opinion. And I know that that's kind of an ideal that is a myth anyway, but I just like the idea that people are at least trying to be completely just the facts, ma'am, about any subject matter.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that didn't happen here is that it's basically impossible for that to happen in this story because the person
that's what I'm
making
saying.
And
that's why I kind of like instantly turn up my nose a little bit to a documentary about a person's self. Or about their own story.
So in a way, I mean, do you feel in some way it's like kind of conceited of them? It's like they're a little full of themselves?
No, it's less about them being conceited and more about there's no way that this is a fully true thing. Because there's no way for it to be true.
But I guess...
Because you're in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't be objective.
One of the big parallels I drew between this movie and F is for Fake, Orson Welles' F is for Fake, directly discusses and sort of picks apart in a filmmaking way that very idea. That we're going to tell you this story that's an objective truth, but it's not real at all.
Yeah, but the whole reason behind that is that it's not a documentary. It started off being a documentary, and he's just like, we're just going to play with the idea of falsehood altogether.
But the thing is, the whole time you're like, what is true and what's not true, and it's important to note that in any documentary, even the most strict and by the book, that's why there are people who are hyper purists about their documentary making, and so Earl Morris doing reenactments in The Thin Blue Line is a big taboo and is a no-no. But there's sort of this idea that, well, you're going to reenact these things with storytelling by an individual or with something that someone wrote. You're not really showing news footage. You're going through recurring documentation, often from secondary sources. You're not going to easily find or rarely ever find a true objective truth in that.
Sure. But my point is that
going in a different direction.
At least in those, and again, I said it from the start. This is a really irrational thing. But I feel like Dan Rather telling a news story about himself, I don't ever want to hear. You know what I mean? What I want to hear is Dan Rather telling me about the Iran-Contra scandal, whatever. You know what I mean? That was kind of my initial cynicism at first. But I still watched it. I still enjoyed it. It's just, like I said, it was a weird thing, and I can't shake it, and I still can't. But it was still, like, really compelling.
Yeah.
And like you said, the real kernel of this is just how fun and entertaining all those people are. They're just good at it.
Yeah,
they're good at telling stories.
And it's a good story.
Yeah.
And I think they know it's a good story.
And they had a lot of great footage, too.
Yeah. Well, here's the other interesting thing. And this leads to why I watched it again. So the first time I watched it, I sort of watched it like, I was doing something else and it was on my second screen on my computer. I was listening to it more than watching it and just kind of like glancing over every now and then. And then my girlfriend watched it and she was like, oh, that was so, interesting. Like there was like all the reenactments that they did. And then I was like, wait, what? Because, I had not questioned what I was seeing and I hadn't watched all of it. And I didn't realize that. So they show a lot of what looks like found footage of her mother, like at the theater and all this stuff. But it's actually all reenactments.
That's crazy.
There's very little there's full real footage.
And so when she told me that,
how can you tell? Did it say reenactment?
It's a different actor.
Well, firstly, once you know that and you watch it, and so the second time I watched it, first of all, it's very obvious because like all the footage is way too convenient and perfect every time. And also, there's a moment towards the end where you see Sarah
they
Polley.
give it away.
Yeah, you see the director Sarah Polley directing the actress that's playing her mother.
You also see her directing. There's a scene where all the kids are around a table at Thanksgiving or something.
Yeah, and
you see them shooting it with an 8mm.
Yeah, and so again, there's this other layer of like playing with the audience, playing with the expectations and
storytelling,
the format,
in general.
And I think it's also, I think to kind of respond to what you were saying, I know what you mean about the genre, but I think what I like about this genre is it's in a way more honest, because a documentary that's like Dan Rather telling you something feels journalistic. It's sort of like coming from a source of authority, a trusted source, but at the same time, no form of filmmaking or writing or anything is ever truly
Without-
objective.
without
it's like
viewpoint.
Yeah, you're assuming that they're trying, but they still have all of their biases, and they're still choosing what to show you and what not to show you, and they're forming the story and sort of pre-digesting it for you. So without you going to all the original sources and making up your own mind about it, you're never going to get your own truth about it in a way.
But I think that in most cases of that, it's at least the person's goal to tell the story in a purely objective way.
Yeah, in this case, it was. And I think in some ways, like her making this film, I think she was like, it's an interesting story, it's a good story, I think people will enjoy it, but I think it was also, the process was a process of self-discovery for her, so it also served her needs as well.
Also, she's trying to make a movie.
Yeah.
So it's her learning that as well.
And I think part of the story and the central character in the story, and the only character who doesn't have their own voice, is the mother. You know, fable about the three fakirs, the wise men who are blind, and one has the trunk of an elephant, the other the tail, and the other like the middle. They all three describe a different animal because they don't have the whole.
I like that you're describing this with a metaphor that's even more obscure.
but it's not that obscure a metaphor. It's saying like the blind guy feels the trunk and says it's a snake. The one guy has the middle and it's a wall, or I don't know what he says it is. And then the third guy is the tail and he says it's something completely different. You have these people who have their own perception and perspective on the reality of this other person who isn't present in the film.
Yeah.
And they're all defining the edges. They're defining the negative space of this person. And then there's this reenactment footage to kind of like hint to you and give you that fill in a little bit. So it's like a gray fog inside there.
And it's also, the footage is often very playful, and it kind of brings kind of a fun energy to it as well, because they mostly show like because they talk a lot about how her mother was this very like lively person, like kind of a mess but kind of exciting, and I think they kind of wanted to have you feel the energy that she had.
I mean that's the thing though,
but it's also fake.
It's all that's all fabricated, and these are all people's recollections, and so that's the other aspect of this, is that you're supposed to, I think, step back and say, we don't know the objective truth about this woman,
right?
Just like we don't like, and we can't estimate.
So
what
you
all
leave
these
the
people,
film still,
but you have an impression of who she is.
You have an impression of what the daughter thinks about her,
but
from being someone who was the youngest child as well, whose mom got sick and died when she was 11, and so has not been in her life. And there's this mystery of her, the personal story, that aspect of the story is missing. That puzzle piece is missing, and so this is her impression of that. It's an impressionistic painting of that puzzle piece.
And in the story, it's more about I think there's a quote from the mess that she left behind, in a way. Like that's really what it's more about, how she affected all of these people and how they're all tied together with her. And that.
Well, I was just disappointed that she didn't talk more about being on Baron Munchausen, the adventures of Baron Munchausen, because that to me is the most interesting part about this whole story.
And I don't think it's even mentioned at all.
She doesn't even mention it. Like, what's the matter? Like,
I don't know.
Oh, my mom. Let's hear about Terry Gilliam, man.
I think there's been several documentaries made about Terry Gilliam.
Yeah, but none by Sarah Polley's point of view.
That's true.
Who was
this is
Sally. Sally
she's
Salt.
warming up into it now.
That was my major disappointment. That's all. That's true.
I liked it. I glommed onto the reenactment stuff like right away. Pretty clear.
Yeah.
I guess I just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's like because of the expectations of the documentary format, you can easily be lulled into seeing it, and
it was done.
Especially
it's done skillfully, where they cut the footage and they repeat footage. To make it seem like, well, we only have a limited amount.
And they treated the footage just right. They might have even filmed some of it on 16 millimeter.
They did on some like classic.
They sort of let it out little, like more and more. They kind of spill
and
it
they
out.
intercut it with real stuff, and they cast well.
That was another interesting anecdote. One of I think the sister is a casting agent, and she was saying that she had basically discovered this woman and was like, oh, if I ever was going to have somebody play my mother, it would be her. And that sort of that seed was then planted for her to actually cast as her.
I mean, there are a few things that are like.
Where did you learn that part?
Since I knew I was going to have to talk about it. I listened to a bunch of interviews and read a bunch of things. I don't remember exactly where I saw it, but I'll link to a few of those things.
I guess one thing too that I did enjoy about this, I liked some of the characters. I liked the father figure a lot, and what's kind of interesting, it's also
the biological father.
No,
or
Mike,
the one who raised her, and he had a great voice too.
So he was, it was interesting too, because this is, as much as it's sort of a catharsis and an experiment for the daughter, I think she was also doing it to kind of help him out of his shell a little bit. It seems like, this guy kind of was a talented but introspective and introverted guy who sort of needed, like, once he found something he was passionate, interested in, he would go for it and shine, but really kind of needed to get pushed out or have circumstance put him out there. And when he got comfortable or was in a situation where he had expectations put upon him, he gave himself over to that, to the point where he would subsume himself. He subsumed himself in the relationship and in the family and lost himself. And probably that's what they kind of talk about in this, is lost the interest of his wife to some degree, because he wasn't the same passionate person he was when he was playing a character that he fully invested himself in. He was basically fully investing himself in being the guy who works to make money for my kids and love my kids. And that's the whole world. That's the whole focus. And he sort of shuts down and loses some of that, whereas she was just out and all about kind of energy all the time and less focus, basically. That was the kind of big difference between the two. But it was interesting to see the daughter focusing the father outwards with this project. That was another kind of interesting goal.
Yeah, and it really ended up
accomplishing.
And it really ended up feeling a lot like collaboration between the two of them, because his story, his written story that he reads out loud, is so key, I think, too, because it's really what ties all these loose elements together. And again, he's a great writer and it has a great voice, so it really worked really well.
There's actually one last thing. So while I was watching it, they bring it in pretty clearly. They talk about perspective, they talk about making film, and again, that's where I drew that connection to F is for Fake, because there's a lot of the ideas that she is talking about in portraying real life stories. He's also discussing and portraying in F is for Fake, and puts out as here's what you think is truth, but here is me telling a story.
I don't think he ever.
No,
I love F is for Fake, but I don't think anything in there is even meant to be taken seriously.
No,
I
know,
don't think he's
but
trying to make an argument about what is.
No, he's not. What he's saying though is that it's a magic trick where he does say to you, this was the truth. That here is a documentary. Here's a person who's doing this thing, and then pulls the
no.
rug
The whole
out.
idea is he's like, this can't be the truth because it's about a guy who lies all the time.
No, I know. But
like, how can I make a documentary about this guy who lies all the time?
But
None of it
before
can be
talking about lying, the idea is, I'm telling you the truth, but I'm a liar. As he says that first part, I'm someone telling you that I'm telling you the truth. I'm a liar. So what is truth? And that's something that she is touching on and talking about in this as well, is that these are people who have an objective or a subjective truth, or objective within their own world. Like the biological father has an objective truth and a scale to the reality. Like, he feels he's the most important person in this woman's life, and that's because his world and his aspect of the story is disconnected from a lot of other people's aspect of the story. It was a very one-on-one relationship where everyone else had a multi-person relationship. Like the raising father, Mike, was connected with the children and this woman and their friends, and so there's a very different perspective and subjectivity. And so it's still true to him, and he's also inflating it and telling it in a certain way. And then the way she cuts it in and tells the story and does reenactments plays with his idea and his truth a little bit in there. And they even talk about, like, hey, there's sort of this hinted at tension between the two of them when she's going to tell her story and when he wanted to tell his story.
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much hinted at. She's like, she gets kind of mad at him.
So there's a lot to think about and talk about. I liked all the layers that it had, and it's also easy to just kick back and watch it and just enjoy the story unfold. But there's also all these other levels that you think about as well. So that's why I really liked it. I hope you dig it too. Again, there'll be links in the show notes. If you're in the US, you can watch it on Amazon Prime or stream it on Hulu, or you can rent it on YouTube or iTunes, and we'll have links to all of that.
She spent her whole life looking for love, and I remember feeling really happy that she had found love and that she'd been loved that much.
Is this the tsunami she unleashed when she went? And all of us still flailing in her wake?
How ironic it is that the final revelation and its aftermath have brought Sarah and I closer together. What about us?
Such a question, there are many possible answers, such as hard work. Years ago, the Holy Feel I'm alone.
You blew it, dude. Yeah, so next week I'm going to bring in a musical act that I've recently glommed onto and really enjoy called Adam Green and Binki Shapiro are the artist's name, and they've collaborated on at least one great record and one EP kind of thing. So go out and listen to them, and I'm going to discuss.
What's the album called?
I think it's just called Binki Shapiro and Adam Green. Or
Adam Green and Binki Shapiro, I think is the name of the record.
We'll have a link to that too in the show notes so you can listen to it and before we discuss it next week.
Yeah. It's really easy. I mean, you can listen to it through any of your streaming stuff. You can just listen to the whole record on YouTube. They have a really neat function now that you can just listen to it track for track. Yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about next week.
So again, this week, the New to You was Stories We Tell by Sarah Pauly. I was one of your hosts, John Holt. You can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho.
I was your other speaking person. And you can find me on Twitter at Beautiful Jules, beautiful Jules.
And I was the third host type person, Keith Vincent, and you can find me at earthlingkeith.com is my way out of date portfolio webpage, or you can check out my tumblr.earthling. or whatever, and it's and that you'll find a lot more of my work.
Great. And so you'll find links to all the stuff we talk about in the show and to each of our Twitters and Tumblrs at newtoyoushow.com, or no, on newtoyoushow.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at newtoyoushow.com. No, not .com. At New to You Show on Twitter, newtoshow.com. Thanks again for listening. Next week, we'll chat with Keith about Adam Binki Shapiro and Adam Green. It may not be new, but hopefully it was new to you.
New to you.
It's all about the music. This pitiful life is all about the music.
With him.